All right, so real quick, just so you know, Chris is my brother-in-law, and so if he tries to say anything bad about me, I would take it with a grain of salt.
I've had a chance to hear it for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, so he said he was going to say something. I have no idea what it's going to be.
And your sister brought up a specific story, but I won't tell.
Oh, is that the Walmart one?
No.
Okay. So anyways, Chris will go on and talk a little bit more about it, but just to give a brief synopsis, Chris has lots of experience in sales, specifically medical sales. He works for Surgeon Mesh right now, where he works with doctors on hernia repairs, and obviously he'll tell a lot more about it. So he has lots of experience in the medical field. What I kind of asked him to focus in on is those that have a potential interest in medical sales, explain a little bit about it and who would be a good fit. And then also, a lot of us want to go into administration. How can we personally utilize medical sales reps and medical equipment suppliers to our advantage? Because when I talked with Chris, he mentioned that a lot of administrators don't know about specific programs and opportunities to improve their hospitals through the resources that Chris can provide. So he'll take about 30 to 40 minutes, and then he'll ask questions. And so we're excited to have him. Chris Murphy.
All right. Thank you. Now, I teach gospel doctrine in my ward, and every couple of weeks I have to give the same preface. I'm not a teacher, I'm a discussion leader. And so I'm going to be very interactive. I may ask some questions, who knows, and so I want this to be a back and forth, because it's a different subject that many of you may not know about. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this bad boy on. Hope I did it right. There we go, all right. I show that because that's in any job, you have to have motivation, I think. And this ultimately really is my motivation. These are my 4 kids. This is my 8-year-old Jaden, who is probably the smartest kid I've ever met. I might be biased. Then you have my 5-year-old Landon, who is the sweetest boy in the world. And then I have my 2-year-old twins, Alicia and Ellie, and they are wild. They're crazy.
They're girls.
And my wife, I keep reminding her that when Landon is 18 and is ready to go on his mission, I'm going to have 2 15-year-old girls at home. And that's when she gets to take over and handle them. But, so I was trying to think about where to go with this. And because I kind of, what I do is unique. Let me ask a question. Anybody here ever had a surgical procedure? Anybody here had surgery before? Most everybody. I bet you didn't realize that it's about a 60% chance that somebody like me was in there, in the room while you were having your surgery. You never meet me, you never know I'm there, but I'm there. Sales reps are involved in 60% of procedures that go on in an operating room. You probably didn't realize that. And the reason being is obviously we're trying to get surgeons and hospitals to use our product, but a lot of times these surgeons are not able to keep up on the newest technology, what's going on, so we become kind of an extra employee. So I wanted to, that's why I titled my PowerPoint, and I'm not by any means Bill Gates, so please. I'm not the greatest, there's a reason I wasn't in IT. Medical device sales, the job we probably never thought about, because it's nothing I never knew existed. I always knew about pharmaceutical reps. Does anybody here want to be a pharmaceutical rep? Not a bad gig, but it's different. It's a different sales call than what I do, and I always tell people, if you want to go into pharmaceuticals, go into pharmaceuticals. If you want to go to medical device, go into medical device. But crossing back and forth between the two is really difficult to do just because they're a completely different sales call. So I want to run through exactly what are medical devices. There you have that right there is the ball and joint of an artificial hip. Orthopedic implants is probably the main one people think of. Anybody can name an orthopedic implant company? Come on, you watch TV, you see the lawyers come up and say, do you have a Stryker hip implanted in you? Right? The Stryker is a big one. Zimmer, Smith and Nephew, Biomet, some big companies. And they're kind of the ones that have I think are the fun ones and the ones that are exciting because they do a lot of different things. You have trauma. I got a friend who's a trauma rep. He's on call 24 hours a day. And he'll get called any hours a day when there's any kind of trauma, car accident, broken leg, and he goes in and he helps the doctors pick out the right equipment that has to be used for that procedure. So he's, I used to sit back and watch him at church, and he'd get up and leave. You could see he'd come back and he'd leave all the time because you could never count it. He could never go on vacation because he was always getting called in to the operating room to help out. And so, but it's very exciting. You know, it's kind of like MacGyver, if you would, dealing with, you know, you're there and you're saying, oh, I think you try this, you might want to put this rod and this pin, and, you know, you're working very closely with the surgeon to do that. So that's joint reconstruction. Now that is a pretty interesting one because, I'm going to be honest, that's where a lot of the money is. And I will talk about money. I don't shy away from it. It's part of life. But joint reconstruction, you may have a parent or a grandparent who's had to have a new hip put in, a new knee put in. My mom's had her hip done 3 times. And those are very popular as our population ages. That right there is where you see a lot of, if you look at any orthopedic surgeon, they love to let you know, oh, I do joint reconstruction. Because it's very lucrative. The hard part about that, if you would, is there's a feast or famine aspect to it, in that, you know, if you're the Stryker rep and the orthopedic surgeon office in Idaho or Idaho Falls likes to use Stryker hips, you're set, because you're going to be just supplying. The poor Zimmer rep, he's left out. He's like, well, doctors don't like to use my hip, so what am I going to do? You know, and so there's a little bit, you know, Idaho Falls, for example, is a very Stryker town. They've used Stryker for years. They will continue to use so. And so that's kind of a hard one. But with new technology coming out all the time, the implants change. There's lots of new advances. To give you an idea, and again, I will talk about money. I almost took a job with a company back in the state of Washington selling hips and knees, and the way they were structuring it. Now, to give you the business side of it, most medical or lead medical device sales reps are commission only, which can be tough sometimes. You got to plan ahead. But for example, this company was, I would get their typical implant for their new hip, just on the hardware for the hip itself, cost $8,000. So every time that gets put in, I just sold $8,000 worth of stuff, right? And the contract they offered me was going to give me 11%. So you think if you get 3 or 4 surgeons using that 3 or 4 times a week, suddenly the money adds up. So it can be very lucrative. But medical device sales, the majority of us are commission only. There's 2 sides to medical device sales. There's when you're a direct rep, Stryker. A lot of orthopedic companies are direct, where you work for a Stryker. You work for that company, and you'll probably get some benefits, a little more structure, or you work for a distributorship. You may know what a distributorship is. A lot of these manufacturers will have distributors. So, for example, the company I work for is actually called BG Medical, and they are the official distributor for the United States for SurgiMesh. Our product is actually made in France. But the company I work for, they distribute. They have the rights to distribute that mesh in the United States. And so then they hire me, and I am the only person who can sell it in Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. And so technically, I'm a 1099 independent contractor. So for example, if I wanted to, I could go out and find another product to sell. And so I'm talking to a few companies about some other products to possibly sell. But as a distributor, I'm independent. I work on my own. So if you're an entrepreneur, there's a good opportunity to really do that side of it. But it's all about getting the right products. Moving on, sports med. Anybody ever had their ACL reconstructed? Done it 3 times. So that's one. You know, if you're in sports med, you're doing a lot of cases. You're in the OR. In the OR with the doctors a lot. And you're helping them place the grafts or the tendons correctly and do some different things. There's not near as much money in that, honestly. It's usually a step up. If you start there, if you want to get into joint reconstruction, and on the orthopedic side. And so, but if you like athletics, it's a great place to be, because you're dealing with athletes, people who hurt themselves in sports. A lot of the orthopedic surgeons are former athletes themselves. It's pretty common. A lot of these companies will say in their ad, when you're posting a job, athletes preferred. They want athletes because they think you have that competitive nature, and you're going to mix well with the physicians. Another side of medical device sales, I kind of broke it down in a couple different areas, are just surgical instruments. You can't put an implant in if you don't have a drill, or you don't have scalpels and malleables and different things. And there are companies who make the instruments that are used on a daily basis in the OR. Some of them are one-time use only. Some are used repeatedly over time. And some of these type sales are done specialty specific. Like I know OBGYN, a lot of those guys do their own thing because it's a whole different type of procedure. But then there's a lot of general surgery instruments you're going to use. And if you're covering that, you're probably going to cover a pretty large territory just because it's not something you go in and it's not a sales call you make often. You'll go talk to the hospital, they'll buy your product, you'll move on to the next one. And then they'll call you when they need to do this or do that, or they'll keep ordering. It's exciting because when a new product comes out, you go see all your people again and you say, hey, I got a new whatever made up, for you to try. And then you go in and you're in the OR with the doctor, they're trying your product and you're walking them through it, and you get to see a lot of variety. And there is a good financial opportunity, and it's probably not the high stress you're going to run into with, no one's going to call you at 2 in the morning and say, get over here, we need a scalpel. They probably have one. I'm just guessing. So chances are you're going to have a little less stress, and you'll get to develop relationships. You're going to be more working honestly with the materials managers and some of your OR managers than you will the physicians. Capital equipment. Anybody know what capital equipment is?
It's equipment that costs over $5,000 and use on more than one patient.
Exactly. Look at you. Beds, X-ray equipment, surgical robots, large dollar purchases is where it would be. Now there is a large amount of money to be made doing this, but it can be a long sales cycle. You're selling an MRI machine, it's going to take you a long time to convince that hospital to fork down $1 million to buy an MRI machine. For example, anybody know what the Da Vinci robot is? Chance, what is that?
Well, from my understanding, it helps complete surgeries. It's got a complex, I don't know the specifics, but just very complex surgeries that the robot can just maneuver around inside the body.
It's it's used for minimally invasive surgeries. They use it in urology, gynecology. They're starting to use it in general surgery, and even cardiology also. That's $1 million robot. And so you sell a couple of those, it's great, but it takes you a long time to sell one. And so there's guys who sell capital equipment who may cover 4 or 5 states, and they travel on a plane from place to place. Another one is operating rooms have become very techy these days, and so there's what's called navigation. All your computers and your screens and your equipment for however they're doing the procedure. There's always tech equipment, computers now, and there's about a year ago a surgery center opened up in Pocatello called Skyline Surgery Center, and I was there when it first opened. I was talking to the guy who was setting up all the computer equipment in the OR. He lives in Denver, and that's what he does. He just goes around selling to each little place, setting them up, and then he never comes back again. But that's he covers from Denver to California. He covers a large area. He's gone a lot, but it's a totally different sales call than what a lot of us make. So capital equipment would be great. And again, it's a little less stress, but you got to be patient. Long sales cycle, and this you're going to work with an administrator a lot. Your CEOs, CFOs, and the doctors. You're going to get a lot of different people working if you're working on capital equipment. But again, it's pretty exciting because you're going to be up on all the new technology. General surgical implants, that's what I work in. That's our product. Mesh for hernia is kind of boring, to be honest with you. Hernia repair is the most common procedure done in the OR. Can you name the several different types of hernias? Probably not, I assume. I couldn't until I started. Inguinal hernias are in your groin. Those are the most popular, common one. And then you have your ventral hernias, which are up in your abdomen, and then your umbilical hernia, so obviously be around your belly button. And we have 45 different makeups of mesh that we sell. We're a little different. We are what's considered, we're off contract, so we are not on, you guys learned about GPOs? What's a GPO? Yeah, I hate those people. I hate a strong word. But those are a bunch of hospitals that get together and say, okay, now that we're together, we can bargain to get a better price, and they kind of decide on what they'll allow hospitals to buy. Well, we're a new technology, we're a little more expensive, okay, we're a lot more expensive than our competitor, and so we are off contract. And so one of the things I was telling Chance about, I'll go to a hospital and the doctor says, yes, I love your product, I want to use it. Tell them to order me a bunch. So I'm like, yes, order some bunch, I make a lot of money today. I go down to the materials person and say, hey, Mary, Dr. So-and-so wants to order $10,000 of mesh. Here's what he wants. And she says, yeah, not happening. You're not on contract. And I say, well, Mary, you know what? I have a way to show it, get around that. Oh, I don't think you do. I'm like, no, I do, because I have a copy of what your GPO's contract says. I have a copy of all the GPOs and what the rules are and what the guidelines are. And on every one, there's a percentage allowed for new technology, basically a gap. And that allows, so hospitals can use new technology. You might say, well, what kind of new technology is that? It's mesh. Ours is made different. It's heat compressed as opposed to woven. And the biggest difference is typically when you put mesh into a patient, you're going to have tissue grow in with the competitor's mesh in about 45, it's going to start growing in about 45 days and be completely covered in 180. Ours starts to grow in 12 days. We're completely covered in 45 days. And the biggest problem with hernia mesh, not that you were wondering, is mesh shrinks when it gets in the body. So imagine you have